Usually when we talk about being exposed to something highly toxic, we kind of expect physical symptoms.
Oh, sure. Like a rash or something.
Yeah, exactly. Take radiation, for instance. You walk into a radioactive zone, you can't see the danger, you can't smell it, but it immediately goes to work on your cells. It's literally altering your DNA.
Right. It operates entirely below the level of conscious awareness, just this profound, invisible, structural dismantling of the body.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of human behavior, specifically, acquiring power over other human beings, and suddenly we just abandon that logic entirely.
We really do. We treat it totally differently.
Right. We treat the acquisition of power like it's just a test of character, like a moral exam or something.
Yeah, if someone gets promoted or wins an election or, inherits an empire and they start acting terribly, we just shrug.
We say, well, they made a bad choice. Or deep down, they were always just a bad person.
And that assumption is honestly probably one of the most dangerous cultural blind spots we have.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we assume the person who just took charge is operating with the exact same biological equipment they always had.
Right.
We evaluate their morality without even considering that the architecture of their brain is physically, structurally changing in response to that new environment.
And that biological transformation is exactly what we are dissecting today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, by the way. Our mission today is to explore a really fascinating intersection of fiction, psychology, and philosophy.
It's a great lineup of topics.
It really is. We have this phenomenal research dossier in front of us titled The Cost of Power. But what makes this exploration so compelling for you listening right now is that we are looking at this hard science alongside excerpts from D.P. Kirk's novel, Vitae, The Awakening.
Yeah, the novel serves as this brilliant, exaggerated laboratory for these ideas.
Exactly. We're going to unpack how the fictional, intensely supernatural world of this book acts as a mirror for the very real-world science of what absolute power does to human neurobiology.
It allows us to watch these psychological frameworks play out on a massive, almost operatic scale.
Yeah. So to give you a foothold in this world, Sanity centers around an immortal elite ruling class known as the Santerrie.
The ultimate establishment.
Right. They have held absolute dominion for centuries, and they exhibit this chilling emotional detachment. It's a completely normalized institutional cruelty.
Which is key to their survival, really.
It is. And on the opposite side of this hierarchy is our protagonist, Kurien. He is a Sanite conscript. Essentially, he's a being engineered and forced to wield devastating violence.
Oh, he struggles with it.
Deeply. He is constantly crushed by the existential weight of what he's made to do.
So the Santerrie represent the untouchable authority, and Kurien represents the subjugated weapon. It frames the core tension perfectly.
It really does. Which brings us to the central question we want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this. We hear the cliche power corrupts all the time, right?
Constantly.
But what if it isn't just a moral failing? What if the social reality of holding power physically rewires your neural pathways? Like literally emptying your capacity for empathy.
Well, the research dossier makes a compelling, if deeply unsettling case for that exact phenomenon. It's grounded in what psychologists call power corruption theory.
Okay, let's get into that. What is that exactly?
To truly grasp it, we have to look at how dominance physically alters brain chemistry. Power actually triggers the brain's rewards circuitry.
Let's anchor this in a specific moment from the book, because I think it illustrates this perfectly.
Good idea.
There is this fascinating scene involving a relatively minor character, this arrogant merchant. He's a businessman dressed in an elegantly trimmed black trench coat.
Right, I remember him.
And he decides to speak with this pompous, condescending arrogance to Covenness Myasuchi, who is a terrifyingly powerful Santerrie leader.
Not a smart move.
Not at all. Kurien is observing this interaction from the shadows, watching the merchant's foolish boldness. And he notes that the merchant is riding the euphoria of corrupted Vitae.
And just for context, Vitae being the literal life force in this universe, which the elites extract from their subordinates.
Right. It is power made physical and consumable. He has harvested this Vitae, and it's coursing through him, making him feel invincible.
Yeah, he's basically high on dominance.
Exactly. Now, the common analogy here is to compare power to drug addiction, like building a tolerance. But I think that falls a bit short, don't you?
Yeah, it's not just about chasing a thrill.
Right. Because if we look at the neurobiology, how does a social construct like having people obey your orders actually penetrate the blood-brain barrier and alter the brain?
Well, the mechanism is actually tied to evolutionary survival. The human brain is essentially a prediction machine, constantly monitoring our social environment.
Okay, making sure we're safe.
Exactly. So when you achieve a position of dominance and your environment bends to your will, like when an order is obeyed, your brain interprets that as a massive survival
Oh,
advantage.
wow. So it rewards you.
Yes, with a massive flood of dopamine. But over time, the brain seeks homeostasis. The dopamine receptors downregulate. The baseline shifts.
So just like a thrill seeker needs a higher cliff to jump off to get the same adrenaline rush, a powerful person needs escalating dominance just to feel normal.
Precisely. So the merchant isn't just acting pompous because he has a bad attitude. His brain now requires escalating levels of control just to feel a baseline sense of okayness.
His neurology is screaming for a higher dose of authority. That is terrifying.
It is, and that dopamine dependency is really only half the equation. Simultaneously, chronic power causes what researchers term amygdala dampening.
Amygdala dampening. Okay, break that down for us.
So the amygdala is your brain's threat detection center. It triggers fear and stress responses, but threat detection is metabolically expensive.
You take a lot of energy to be worried all the time.
Exactly. If your brain perceives that you are at the absolute top of the hierarchy, it assumes you are safe. It just stops allocating resources to fear.
Wow.
Your cortisol levels drop. Your amygdala becomes less reactive.
Meaning you literally lose the biological capacity to feel stress about the consequences of your actions.
You become biologically immune to stress. And when you are immune to the stress of consequences, your sensitivity to the suffering of others just plummets.
Because if nothing threatens you and you feel no anxiety, the pain of the people beneath you doesn't register as a problem you need to solve.
Right, it's just background noise.
We see this mirrored in real-world corporate structures constantly. Like systems that actively reward aggressive dominance often elevate individuals who have undergone this exact amygdala dampening.
Oh, absolutely.
A CEO might lay off 2,000 people without losing a minute of sleep. And not necessarily because they were born a sociopath, but because years of insulated power have biologically muted their threat perception.
They are completely buffered from the fallout. And that biological muting leads us directly to the secondary effect of chronic dominance, which the Dossier calls the empathy erosion effect.
Okay, this is where the Santerrie go from being arrogant to being architecturally cruel.
Yes, this is the structural part.
Because it's one thing for an executive to be out of touch. It's a whole other thing to build an entire society around the torture of others.
Well, empathy, neurologically speaking, relies heavily on mirror neurons. These are the networks that allow us to run a parallel simulation of someone else's emotional state.
So if you see someone in pain, your brain simulates a fraction of that pain so you can understand it.
Right. But power corruption theory argues that as power increases, mirror neuron activation measurably decreases.
It just turns off.
Basically, the brain essentially decides that simulating the emotions of lesser individuals is a waste of cognitive energy.
Oh, that is chilling. You stop prioritizing humanity and start prioritizing clinical efficiency.
Exactly.
There is a sequence in Vitae that captures this empathy erosion effect so vividly it's honestly hard to read. It's the Inquisition scene.
Oh, yeah, that scene is brutal.
Kurien is strapped down to a table. He is enduring horrific, agonizing physical pain as his body is forcibly deprived of Vitae. And observing all of this from behind a mirrored window is a Santerrie mistress.
Just watching him.
Just watching. She is watching a man being torn apart from the inside, and her only reaction is a casual remark that his suffering is fascinating.
She observes him entirely as a specimen, just a biological curiosity to be tested before his final year of conscription.
And the attendants carrying out the torture, there's a balding, pure-blood humanis man and a mutated sand attendant. They are just going about their gruesome tasks with absolute normalized detachment.
Well, they're just clocking in for a day's work.
Exactly. That clinical environment is only shattered when Kurien's survival instinct violently takes over, and he retaliates. He sends a blackened spike of sanguineous vitae straight through the balding man's head.
It's a sudden, visceral intrusion of consequence into a room that was specifically designed to be free of it.
Right. But I want to throw a hard challenge at this biological framework, if that's okay.
Go for it.
When we look at that mistress standing behind the glass calling torture fascinating, are we letting her off the hook by blaming her biology?
That's a very fair question.
If we say her mirror neurons are no longer firing, and she is biologically incapable of registering Kurien's humanity, aren't we giving tyrants a neurobiological excuse for evil? Like saying, my amygdala made me do it, feels like a huge cop-out.
Yeah, that is the crucial philosophical friction in the dossier. And to address it, the research pulls in the philosopher Michel Foucault, specifically his concept of power as structure.
Okay, how does Foucault help us here?
Well, Foucault would argue that looking at the mistress's individual biology is too narrow. Power is not just a substance an individual holds.
Right.
It is embedded in the institutions, the rituals, and the actual architecture of the society.
So it's not just her brain that's the problem, it's the room she's standing in.
Exactly. Think of the Santerrie Council's centuries-long rule as a massive, complex maze. If you build a maze where the only way to reach the center is to step on a button that electrocutes someone else.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah. Eventually, the only people standing in the center are those willing to press the button. The Santerrie system actively selects for and requires emotional detachment.
Wow.
The mistress is a product of a culture where empathy is an evolutionary disadvantage. If she retained her empathy, the system would have expelled her long ago.
That parallels real-world history so closely. If you look at long-standing aristocracies or dynasties, they almost universally devolve into extreme decadence and cruelty over generations.
They really do.
The architecture of their society insulates them so completely from the human cost of their comfort that cruelty becomes a cultural norm, not just an individual pathology, like turning down the volume on a TV over centuries until you forget the TV even produces sound.
That's a perfect analogy. The machine produces the cruelty regardless of who is pulling the levers.
Right.
And if the Santerrie represent this ultimate system-level corruption, it forces us to look at the philosophical alternative. Like, how does one hold power without becoming a monster?
Which brings us to the collision of Friedrich Nietzsche and existential ethics in the dossier. Because our protagonist, Kurien, is not powerless.
Not at all.
He possesses terrifying destructive capabilities. So how does he handle it?
Well, the dossier uses Nietzsche's concept of the will to power to frame this. Nietzsche posited that the fundamental human drive isn't just survival.
It's about domination.
It is the drive to overcome, to grow, to exert influence over one's environment. But he also recognized a shadow side to this drive. When the will to power goes unchecked by any higher moral framework, it mutates into sheer parasitic domination.
The Santerries are the embodiment of that shadow side. Their entire existence revolves around preserving their own status through the absolute subjugation of the Sanites and the humanities classes.
Completely unchecked power.
But I want to pause and present a thought experiment for you listening right now. Put yourself in the shoes of a Santerrie elite. You are immortal. You have lived for 5, 6, maybe 700 years. If your lifespan stretches out that long, wouldn't the fleeting mortal lives of everyday people naturally start to look insignificant, like the lives of mayflies?
Oh, definitely. That introduces the element of temporal dislocation. The research highlights how extreme longevity or just heavily insulated security really amplifies the psychological cost of power.
It creates monsters out of sheer boredom.
Yes, exactly.
If you outlive every consequence, and you outlive everyone who could possibly hold you accountable, the weight of your actions just evaporates, meaning becomes almost impossible to sustain.
Which is where existential ethics steps in as the counterweight in the dossier. Existentialism argues that freedom and power inherently demand profound responsibility.
You have to own your choices.
Right. If you refuse that responsibility, if you wield power merely to stave off your own boredom or to preserve your comfort at the expense of others, you suffer a deep internal existential decay. You hollow yourself out.
And this is the trap Kurien is caught in. He is caught between power as a burden versus power as an identity. He is forced to act as a weapon.
He doesn't want the power, but he has it.
We see the sheer scale of his destructive capability in the vault escape scene in the book. He is cradling Sharina, who has just been brutally impaled, and his grief and rage turn him into a walking force of nature.
It's a terrifying scene.
A Santerrie soldier tries to stop him, drawing this massive 6-foot blade sheathed in grappling energy, and Kurien doesn't even pause. He just walks right through the soldier with absolute, brutal, overwhelming force.
The violence is total, but the divergence between Kurien and the Santerrie really happens in the aftermath of that violence.
Right, because he's disgusted by himself.
Yeah.
He wrestles with the horror of what he is capable of doing.
In psychological terms, Kurien is experiencing profound moral injury.
Moral injury, that's a powerful term.
It really is. This is a concept often studied in combat veterans or healthcare workers. It occurs when an individual perpetrates, fails to prevent, or witnesses acts that transgress their own deeply held moral beliefs.
So it's different from PTSD.
Yeah, it is different from fear-based trauma. It is a fracture of the identity itself.
The Santerrie elites bypassed moral injury centuries ago by simply eradicating their moral beliefs. They killed their own identity as empathetic beings just to avoid the cognitive dissonance.
They traded their humanity for psychological comfort. But for Kurien, his forced violence causes him agonizing moral injury.
Because he still cares.
Exactly. He feels the agonizing weight of every life he ends or alters. The prefrontal cortex of his brain, where moral reasoning lives, is essentially at war with the actions he is forced to take.
I love how the Dossier pulls that thread together. It presents this brilliant contradiction. The very thing that is torturing Kurien, his intense guilt, his self-loathing, the fact that he feels like a monster, is actually the exact mechanism keeping his humanity alive.
It's a tragic paradox, really. The pain of the moral injury is the proof that his soul, for lack of a better term, is still intact.
As long as it hurts, he's human.
Right. As long as wielding power hurts him, his mirror neurons are still firing. He has not succumbed to the empathy erosion effect.
That is profound. So let's pull all these threads together. When we synthesize the neurobiology of the Dossier with the narrative of Vitae, the overarching revelation is that absolute power, especially when insulated from consequence over long periods of time, is not simply a corrupting force.
No, it's not.
It is an emptying force.
It creates a void where a human being used to be. Systems of unchecked dominance build walls around those in charge. When you remove consequence, the brain ruthlessly prunes the neural pathways dedicated to empathy and fear.
It just deletes them for efficiency.
Yes. In the Santerrie society, caring about others isn't just ignored, it has become a biological liability. To survive at the top of that hierarchy, you must selectively starve the parts of your brain that connect you to the rest of humanity.
There is a line from Kurien in the text that serves as the perfect thesis for this entire discussion. He is reflecting on the immortal elites who rule his world, and he observes, power without consequence is a sickness, and they have been sick for centuries.
It's a haunting summary because, as the science shows us, the sickness isn't a metaphor. It is a literal structural rewiring of the mind.
It really is. And that leaves us with a final lingering thought for you to take into the rest of your week.
Something to mull over.
Yeah. We've spent this deep dive talking about immortal tyrants, forced supernatural violence, and massive societal architectures of cruelty. But the principles of neurobiology scale all the way down to the micro-interactions of our everyday lives.
They absolutely do. The dynamics of dominance are fractal. The dopamine spikes and mirror neuron dampening apply at the smallest levels just as predictably as they do at the highest.
So think about the micropowers you hold right now in your own life. It could be the authority you have over a subordinate you manage at work.
Or the control you have over a child or a pet.
Right. It could even be the transient, temporary power you hold in a customer service interaction simply because you are the one holding the credit card.
We all hold power in some form. And if the science tells us that any degree of power naturally begins to dull our ability to perceive the emotional reality of others, well, the question becomes one of active maintenance.
How do you protect your brain? As we established at the very beginning, you wouldn't walk into a radioactive zone without a hazmat suit. You would take intentional steps to protect your DNA.
You'd be crazy not to.
So when you step into any position of power, no matter how brief or how small, what intentional practices are you adopting to ensure your own mirror neurons don't go quiet?
How do you ensure that the invisible dopamine-driven poison of dominance doesn't slowly, quietly empty you out?
It requires a daily, deliberate choice to remain tethered to consequence.
Building a hazmat suit for the soul, essentially.
A hazmat suit for the soul. I love that. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Keep questioning the structures around you, stay fiercely empathetic, and we will catch you next time.